Hello, everyone. It is Mark Kelly here, founder of AI Ireland. I hope you're doing really, really well wherever you are in the world today. I'm absolutely delighted that we have got Kalika Bali, Senior Principal Researcher at Microsoft, joining us on the podcast today. Kalika, thank you very much for joining us on the show here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we jump into your work at Microsoft, I'd love if you could tell me a little bit about your journey into the world of linguistics, large language models, research, AI. Tell us a little bit about that kind of sliding doors moment. I'm trying to probably recalling the one where you were kind of going to drop off some papers for your sister, and suddenly you had this different type of moment that happened.
That's true. For me, it was very accidental. I've accidentally fallen into things, literally, as well as metaphorically. My first degree is in chemistry. I had decided I wanted to be a journalist, like my dad. But my sister, who is a neuroscientist, she wanted to pursue higher studies in biochemistry and biotechnology, etc. So I went to pick up forms for her admission in various universities, and I looked at this university and said, "Oh, this looks nice. I would love to study here." And then I picked up the prospectus for myself, and I quickly went through it. And ancient history, because I just read a lot of ancient history, was my first pick, and my second pick was something called linguistics. I had no idea what it was. So I just kind of like looked it up, and it seemed to be about languages. And there's a British Council library in Delhi, where I'm from. I went to the British Council library and I picked up this thin book called The Introduction to Linguistics, and then I took my entrance exam for the university, and I got in. So nobody was more surprised than I was.
Isn't it
you know
incredible how these kind of moments in our lives totally transform what happens next later on,
yeah.
and that kind of just builds on it. Such a kind of a fortunate event. Tell us about the work that you do day to day in Microsoft.
I'm a researcher, like you said, and I have been with Microsoft Research in India, the India lab, for almost, well, a couple of months short of 19 years. And my focus has been on multilingual systems, multilingual technology, very much in a social context. So, I actually used to, before I returned home to India, I used to work in the startup in London. And at that time, all this voice tech was just coming up, becoming real. And the startup I worked for used to have these, like, you could call a phone number and retrieve your mails as voice messages, etc. It was like really the beginning. And this was a nice to have thing there, but I could see that this would be an amazing technology to provide access to people in India, where literacy at that time was much lower, access was less, the spread of internet was less, and having a voice-based interface on a phone would be really amazing. That's how I got into this and returned to India to look into this. And I was very lucky that within a couple of years of, I mean, I worked with, Pico Peters Computers, which was a spin-off from Indian Institute of Science. I worked with HP Labs in India. But then Microsoft Research started, and it was like a very good moment to do that. And since then, that's what I've done. I've kind of, first it was like, oh, this would be nice to have for Indian languages. And then when you cover, most of the Indian languages, like the official Indian languages, 22 of them, then you think about like, oh, there's so many other languages and dialects. Then when you start looking at them, then you start associating some of these lower resource languages, not always, but typically are spoken by marginalized communities. So from there, I went to there, and then looking into how marginalized communities could have access through technologies. And then when you start looking at that, then you start worrying about things like how gender works, right? And that's I saw that technology was not only barred by various divisions amongst languages, and how marginalized a community was in a socio-economic manner, but also, how gender worked in those communities. Women had lesser access to technology. And that's how I started working in this whole space of, responsible AI, multilingual responsible AI kind of a thing.
Do you think that was because you're just naturally curious and you just started to spot some more trends and associations, or was it a lot of gut feel, and then you're trying to back it up with data and metrics? What kind of it gave you the confidence to continue with it?
I think as an Indian, you're already aware. If you live in India, you're already aware of how different languages work. And, this whole hierarchy between different languages, like a mainstream language as opposed to a dialect, which may be actually a language in its own right and not a thing. So I think that's like just part of the environment that I grew up in. And then because I was working in language and because, as a background in linguistics, I would interact a lot with the communities and talk to the people. The other thing was that in our lab, in the India lab, we had a very huge technology for empowerment group, which was working on various aspects of how to empower people through technology. So there was a lot of kind of interaction of all these things that led me there, but it just happened very naturally in the whole scheme of things. Yeah.
Tell me about some of the problems and research that gives you the most energy currently, because there's so many different rabbit holes that you could fall down. But what are the kind of the golden thread that's kind of maintaining your focus? And then how do you try to have that kind of rigor around something that's naturally, curious, research, the element of it, you're not trying to put too much metrics on it, but you still, there's so much pressure to get stuff out there that's meaningful.
Yeah, no. So the thing is that I enjoy research, but I have always been a more pragmatic kind of a researcher, um, in the sense that I love to be involved with things that people can actually use. That's always been a thing with me, and luckily, language technology is like that. And I always say that the thing that gets me up every morning is that I'm working towards a goal where language is not a barrier to access to technology. It doesn't matter whether you speak English or Hindi or Gondi or some other language in another part of the world. You have the same kind of access to technology, right? And when that happens, I think my job is over. But just to do that, there are so many problems. There's a problem of data, which is like the biggest issue that we have, especially when we are working with marginalized language communities, right? There is no data. So how do you go about, like, you can't scrape the net and get data? That's not going to happen. So how do you deal with that? Do you get more data? How do you get more data? um, if there's less data, then what other things that you have to be innovative about to make it work without data, right? The other thing is the socio-cultural context, right? Especially in the case of RAI, I like to say bias does not translate very well, right? So if you are kind of basing all your bias mitigation, safety, trust components of an AI model application service from the West, right? Like you're taking it from the West and then kind of like just putting a translated wrapper around it. It's not going to work for most people. The context is completely different. So those are the kind of things that have like kept me going. So right from the start, it was always about access. That's why I wanted to return to India. So that access to technology through which you have access to information, access to education, access to services, access to a better life in some way. That's debatable. Some people might not agree, but I do think it kind of then runs through the entire gamut. And the reason I am excited about AI is that as well, that things that took us years to do now can be done very fast.
Yeah, that access allows so much choice. And
Yeah,
suddenly you feel empowered that you can have more choice and your self-esteem increases, you feel you're part of the journey. And then there's so many other
absolutely.
benefits that actually come with that. Is there any kind
Absolutely.
of simple ways that you've seen that kind of translate to improving people's lives?
This was like something really simple. many years ago, we worked on Gondi, which is a small tribal language in central India. And small is only relative. It has 3 million users, speakers. But they never had the schools and the children there never had any children's books in their own language. Okay. And, you know, through a partnership with a technology institute, a civil services organization, and an NGO, not-for-profit organization called Pratham Books, and us, we kind of like came up with a way, to translate the books that Pratham Books had across to Gondi. And initially it started as a workshop. It started slowly, and within 2 weeks, 200 books were translated. And that was like the absolutely first time that parents and children had access to books in their own language, children's books and
That
storybooks
is
in their own language.
crazy.
Yeah.
200.
Yes.
So even just that as itself, as a starting point, just opens up so many
Amazing.
wonderful opportunities.
Absolutely. So that was like a really amazing moment. The other thing is that, like, working on bias itself is like very difficult thing. Um, because with every in India, especially because we are talking about several layers of India here, there are many Indias that coexist. Um, what is considered biased changes as you travel, maybe from a very urban center outwards towards rural, or from a very educated, higher economic social class to a relatively less educated class, but or westernized versus non-westernized. So all these factors play into it, and it's amazing to see how women, when exposed, like we did a gender bias workshop to feed into some of the bias mitigation stuff that we were doing. And women, when exposed to the idea of what bias might be, actually respond very well and can come up with really amazing examples from their own lives, right? Which most technology right now is not able to handle.
Please give me 30 seconds of your time. It blows my mind that only 9% of listeners actually subscribe to our podcast. I'm going to ask you one favor. If you like and enjoy this podcast, please can you subscribe? That one thing will really, really help us in the team get you the very, very best guests. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So we've talked about the data set, the challenges of getting that data set. What other ways could developers be more cognizant about utilizing and building out AI models when they may not be aware of the problems?
There are several ways in this that this could be handled. First is just awareness, like within an organization, etc. But this other thing is, I do believe that the discourse amongst developers around, say, something like gender, right, is about gender neutral in some sense, right? So we're blind to gender. We treat gender, and it's like the equivalent of equality versus equity kind of a thing. The problem with that is, we can never be blind to gender because it's kind of woven into our culture, languages, the way we interact with things, etc. But we have to be aware. So that's why, like, I kind of like the term gender aware technology rather than gender neutral, where you are aware that this is how it is, right? Like, for example, pronouns, big thing in English, irrelevant in Hindi, right? Because we do not have gendered pronouns. So nobody who speaks Hindi can even understand what the fuss is about. But we have a very complex gender system for Hindi. In a way, like French, like, everything has to have a verbal ending that's either masculine or feminine. Even non-human things have to be either masculine or feminine, and that's part of our, like, a verbal system, our adjectival system, etc., etc. And there's no way that you can neutralize that. You cannot have there is no they equivalent for doing this, right? But you have to be aware and then you have to make sure that your representation is um, you know um, kind of equal in the whole thing, that you the data and the generation that you have, or your technology should be able to handle the generation as well as the processing of language in a more aware manner, and in a more equitable manner. Like, it shouldn't be saying doctors are always men and nurses are always women, kind of a thing.
I like that aware. So you're kind of from step one, you're cognizant of it.
Yeah,
You're not saying it's not true, right? You're aware of that. So we've talked about some of the challenges of data set. We've talked about being more cognizant of actually building out the models and having that mindset of being aware. How do you how do you use AI yourself day to day? Like what kind of productivity hacks do you use to be better at what you do?
one of the things that I really, really enjoy is like as a bouncing of my ideas. Like I do use AI a lot by putting out an idea and saying like, okay, I'm thinking this. What do you think? Then it gives me some opinion. Then I have an argument back and forth with it, and through that process, my idea gets more clarified. I get more clarity in my own head about like, okay, this is interesting, this is not interesting, this is another way of thinking. So I actually, that's the one thing that I love using AI for. The other things are like, of course, like, for very standard emails, when you just have to kind of accept something or thank something, very standard format emails, I do use AI.
I
I
really
use,
like that.
yeah, I use the Copilot a lot. Um,
The ideation one is brilliant because
yeah,
you come up with option one, option two, option three, and maybe it's none of those, but it
yeah,
helps you form option
yeah,
four.
yeah,
And it's really kind of having that kind of you're really just fleshing it out, debating it, and that's just a simple prompt. Or
yeah,
act as if devil's advocate here, pros, cons, and also the emails. What I've been doing lately is speech to text. So
yeah,
actually speaking, and then you're writing for me. I find that really helpful. And one of the other ways that I found AI particularly helpful is that if you give it a persona, act as if, right? So I can imagine in the field that you're in, you could say act as if you are biased or
yeah,
act as if you are aware.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
what are we missing here or what's the blind spot here? Sure there could be loads of ways to do
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I find that part like I'm at an age and stage where I'm quite used to writing by myself. So I do, write and like ask it to proofread or something. But I don't take that much help in, if I'm actually supposed to write something, because that's just because I'm just used to writing myself. And
Yeah,
so that
because
I
I
don't
could,
do.
yeah, because I was also trying to think is you in the world of research now, we've now got AI publishing research papers. How does this augmentation, this co-pilot kind of scenario build us out for the future? What's the art of the possible with that?
Yeah. The other thing is there is this research thing. Doing research with the Copilot is amazing. It is amazing. So if you kind of like even on ChatGPT, if you go with the deep research kind of a thing, or in Copilot, you go with the research thing, it would take me so long to gather citations. Right? And now I can just say, like, I want all the papers. The thing is, you still have to check the papers, whether they actually exist or not. But this is getting better and better. But, some of those things, literature review, those kind of things took so long. But that with the research thing is really, really easy and helpful and fast. I can finish it in an hour or two instead of taking like a day going through all the references, etc.
Isn't that incredible how you would
It is.
spend a day, 2 days, 3 days, and I even find myself now, if it's 2 or 3 minutes or it's taking 7 minutes to do the task, I'm like, come on, hurry up. Like how my expectations have changed in a year that I
Yeah.
wanted to hurry up. Like the
Yeah.
bar just keeps rising.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it like, in the past, one actually had to have physical copies of journals and papers to kind of go through it. I still have like stacks of conference proceedings, actual physical ones, from way back. And now, then it came to the point that if you can't find it on the internet, it doesn't exist, right? And now you don't even have to go and find it. Like, you can just ask AI to find it for you. You still have to check it. I have to keep emphasizing you still have to check
Yes, yes,
it.
you can't say my dog ate my homework. Has any of your work that you've put out to the world within marginalized communities surprised you?
So one of the things that did surprise me was like, having worked with marginalized communities and they've all, or like low resource language communities, they've usually been marginalized. And then suddenly, like, we had this request from a very tiny community in the northeast of India called Idumishimi. And there are only about 10, 11,000 speakers of that community. And we all like my intern went there, and a lot of us had this whole thing that, oh, we are going to build this speech system and we're going to change their whole thing. And you go there and you find that almost everybody there has an iPhone. Okay. And then you find that people there are, discussing with equal ease, what's happening around in the community, and Dostoevsky or 100 Years of Solitude, right? Like, so it's not your typical marginalized community. People are educated, people have access to technology in English, people are, they're not economically on the lower rung. And then we kind of started talking to it's a tribal community again, so we started talking to the council, the culture council of the tribe, and asked them like, why do you even need anything in your language, right? Like technology in your language, you have access. And they said something really interesting. They said that in today's world, if you are not represented in the digital world, you might as well be invisible. And for us, it is extremely important that we be visible in the world outside and people know about us. And for that, we do need to preserve our language, our culture, and have technology to kind of put it out to people. And that was like, yeah, these are not like poor people with no access, etc. There is an identity part to all of this as well.
And
Um,
not being able to communicate, getting your message across, being seen, like it has such a bad impact on your whole
yeah,
psyche, your self-esteem, feeling like
exactly.
you can't communicate, being verbal and getting that across, and then having that history to weave in.
Absolutely.
I matter. I want to share it with the world. This is our heritage. This is our story. Let's share it out there and
Yeah.
have that voice.
Yeah. Yeah, so that actually till that happened, I have to say even I had a very like blinkered view of low resource language technology, marginalized communities, etc. And that really kind of opened my mind to the fact that there's more to this than just access to services.
Yeah. Tell me about the best piece of advice you'd be offering students coming into the world of research, particularly in the world of large language models now.
Don't get swayed by the flavor of the month. um, there are very hard problems that need to be solved. Find something that excites you. That's always true. But, don't keep chasing the tail of a trend always, because I see that a lot. I see that happening a lot. Suddenly efficient AI is the thing and everybody wants to go into that. Then, some other thing comes into being and everybody wants to go into that. And right now it's moving so fast that if you're a student, especially a PhD student, then you really need to focus on deeper, bigger problems than following the tail of the trend.
I like that. So stick to the problem you're trying to solve. Remember, it's just a tool that's going to help
Yeah,
you, assist you within the
yeah,
journey, but fundamentally, what's going to be that impact. And I love the way you're so focused on that pragmatic element, that golden thread within it. Kaliki Bali, Senior Principal Researcher at Microsoft, thank you for taking the time to share your journey and some of the wonderful research that you're involved in.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Hello, my name is Mark Kelly, founder of AI Ireland. We're passionate about collaboration and sharing the incredible stories behind every AI journey. That's why we're always looking for guests to join our in-person AI Ireland podcast experience. If you're working on innovative AI projects or have a story that can inspire others, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to share your insights, experiences and ideas with a really vibrant community that's as excited about AI as you are. So if you're ready to be part of this conversation and help shape the future of AI in Ireland, please get in touch today. We can't wait to collaborate with you. Thank you.